multiple copies of your data and why. Sure backup is the testing mechanism. So, hey, I have my backup file from last time. Let me test it within the Veeam fenced off virtual lab and make sure that it's recoverable running a ping, heartbeat, and app test. Also, cloud tier immutability, where object lock with Amazon S3, if you're utilizing them for your object storage, you can make your backups immutable for a particular period of time. The detection, we can talk about Veeam 1, which is the monitoring. We talk about alarms and alerts where suspicious ransomware activity, suspicious backup sizes. Also talk about data integration, which is we can integrate with particular antivirus vendors to be able to scan your backup product, your backups before restoring them. Teresa and I are also going to talk a little bit about the HPE piece where storage snapshots, StoreOnce Catalyst. Snapshots are read-only. You can't a hacker can't Catalyst.
Kevin, can I ask you a question about the cloud tier? Yes. You mentioned AWS. Is that the only cloud that you guys support? I mean, you know, Azure's out there, Google's out there, you know, IBM, Oracle. There's a lot of different public clouds out there now.
Yeah, we support many clouds, different types of clouds, both, for example, storage, you know, service providers, as well as those public clouds such as IBM, Azure, AWS, Cloudian, those types of you know, S3 type of buckets. When it comes to the cloud tier immutability, right now it's only for the public clouds is only for AWS at the moment.
Okay. Are there plans to go with other people, or is that going to be?
Yeah. There's some other S3 vendors that are introducing it. For example, Cloudian is one. A couple of others, Backblaze as well. But it's one of those things where more and more vendors can do that. We're not there with Azure yet. I haven't heard of a time frame there. Azure is very popular as well.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I don't see any questions coming on the board here yet, but if they do, I'll make sure I hit you with them.
Okay, perfect. So good backup hygiene. If there's one thing besides the awesome beer that you're tasting that you take out of my presentation, it is follow the 3-2-1 rule. What does that mean? 3 copies of your data, including production, 2 different media types, which is, you know, a disk here and a disk there, or tape or cloud, and 1 offsite. I've seen environments that have gotten hit with ransomware, and I've seen their backup environment get infected and they lose data. It's very ugly. And following the 3-2-1 rule, very important. Even, you know, here's an example. Tape is alive and well, and if your tape is sitting in an Iron Mountain box at an Iron Mountain location, for example, it can't be hit with ransomware. So please make multiple copies of your data, whether it's another disk, cloud, tape, etc. Different credentials for backup systems. Used to be when I started at Veeam 4 years ago, hey, just use domain admin, it's fine. But I'm finding more and more organizations are trying to get away from that smartly. And you can use organizations that you can use credentials that are off the domain on a work group or in a dedicated domain. The HPE storage snapshots. So if you have 3PAR, Primera, or Nimble, you can leverage those storage snapshots. The cool thing about storage snapshots is faster backups because you're utilizing the storage snapshot to run the backup versus a VMware backup. So you're taking the load off the hypervisor. They're read-only. You can't access the hacker can't access them. And also storage snapshots, if you're running snapshots hourly and your backup is, say, 24 hours ago, you can do a restore with Veeam off your storage snapshot. So you're lowering your recovery point objective. So you're not having to go as far back in time to do a restore. And testing the backups with Sure Backup, which I mentioned. When I first started at Veeam 4.5 years ago, I remember I was shadowing one of our inside engineers, and it was a jewelry manufacturer in New York City, and 40% of his restore operations had failed the year before. 40% of his restores from corrupted data. So testing those backups out can allow you to say to your CIO, yes, I can restore this confidently, and have it not be a resume generating event. You can hit next. So Veeam with HPE, it's a great story to tell. There is so much integration, so many many different data points where we can integrate. So on the left, you're going to see your VMware environment, for example. You're backing it up. You have data stores with Nimble, 3PAR, Primera, or HCI. You can take advantage of the stored snapshots with Veeam. You can send it off to a Nimble, a map drive for your backups. Say in Apollo, which is a nice appliance-based type of backup solution with Veeam, or a storage dedupe appliance, which is going to really crunch down that data for you. Then you can send it off, via Catalyst to another StoreOnce for longer-term retention if you like the on-prem type of model. You can even do tape out to StoreEver for your secondary copy. Veeam recommends that your first copy be to disk. That way, it's for faster backups. Faster backups and restores, particularly the restores. Tape is alive and well, and that StoreEver is a great solution along with Veeam. Or, you can have SimpliVity be your repository as well, send it off there. And then you can kick it off either Cloud Connect to a cloud service provider. We integrate with many across the country as well as in the world. Or one of the managed clouds, such as an Azure AWS for that third copy, or HPE Cloud Volumes Backup. So, Parisa, is there anything from the Cloud Volumes Backup perspective you'd like to add?
Yes, and I will actually cover it more, but I did want to include the most recent offering that we have with Veeam is the support of HPE Cloud Volumes Backup, which allows you to back up directly to the cloud and also recover very quickly. So I'll go over those details a little bit more in my presentation.
Okay, so I just saw a question regarding if your data is in the cloud. You can back that up with Veeam. We have Veeam backup for AWS, Veeam backup for Azure. So for those cloud workloads, you can back them up to object storage. You can make a secondary copy, bring it on-prem. So there's options available for being able to move that data around in order to back it up, having that secondary copy, and meeting that 3-2-1 rule.
You also have it for software as a service like Office 365, correct?
That is correct. Office 365, we will back up OneDrive, Exchange, SharePoint, and Teams. And the cool thing about it is you can store that backup environment wherever you want. It can be on-prem, it can be at one of those cloud service providers that I mentioned, or in AWS or Azure. They're right in the marketplace there. So a lot of flexibility, it's easy to use and very powerful. You click next.
Oh, okay. Sorry, this one's building out.
That's okay.
All right.
So now I'm going to turn things over to Stephen for some more beer tasting. So take it away, Stephen.
Back. Stephen?
All right, good to be back. So on this round, we're going to talk a little bit about Oktoberfest, the actual festival, and then we're going to try Maplewood's Fest beer. But we're going to hold off on trying this right away because we're actually going to taste this in a more analytical sense. Cool? So traditionally, Oktoberfest is held in the last 2 weeks of September into the first week of October. So yes, Oktoberfest, but Oktoberfest actually starts in September. It was first officially held in 1810 to honor the Prince of Bavaria's wedding in the city of Munich. The party lasted 5 weeks. Can you imagine having a 5-week long festival? To me, that sounds perfect. Since then, the festival has been happening at the same time every year. Last year in 2019, since there was no 2020 Oktoberfest, they drank 150 million liters. That is the equivalent of 40 million gallons or 3 million half-barrel kegs. If you think about the logistics of all of that, just to make that much beer flow in like an organized manner is pretty mind-blowing to me. Like we said last time, the traditional beer was Märzen, but now Fest beer is a traditional beer. It is a lighter, more hoppy, both on bitterness and aroma, and a more refreshing version. It's kind of a play to modern palates of what people enjoy drinking now versus what people enjoyed drinking then. Just so you know, inside of Germany, Oktoberfest is an appellation. So think like champagne. You can't call champagne that's made out of champagne. It's something else. Just like that, only in Germany, if you're outside the city limits of Munich, you have to call your beer a Märzen. You can't call it an Oktoberfest. But here in the United States, we don't follow German law. So any beer out that we choose to call an Oktoberfest here, we're welcome to call an Oktoberfest. Just so you know, the breweries that are officially in the city limits of Munich are going to be Spaten, Paulaner, Lowenbrau, Hackerschwor, and Hofbrau. So if you're looking to get like the true Munich Oktoberfest experience, those are the beers you should be hunting down at your bottle shops. Cool. So we're going to analytically taste this beer real quick, and then we're just going to drink it for fun. So this is Maplewood Fest beer. This beer is brewed literally blocks away from our bar. So right off the bat, let's just go ahead and hold it up to a light source and just look at this beer. I'm getting a nice white head, but what I'm going to notice is that it's lighter than the other Oktoberfest style beer that we had. So knowing what we knew about that previous beer, what's this going to tell me? Well, it maybe will tell me that the malt profile is going to be lighter than the previous one. Maybe it'll have less toasted notes, maybe less caramel notes. And this it might be a little bit different. So go ahead and smell the beer. You can smell it from a distance. I like to get way up in there. What's that primary flavor or primary aroma, pardon me, we're smelling? Citrus. That's a good call out. So most likely these are American brewers. They're using American hops. And this is a very hop forward beer for an Oktoberfest or a fest beer. They use traditionally in this style what are known as noble hops. And noble hops are the parents of all hops. So these are the traditional hops. And typically they have a very herbaceous and spicy aroma and flavor. In this beer, they're actually putting hops in it, kind of similar to what us Americans like in an IPA, but not as overdone. So now that we smelled it, I also smell secondarily some nice like sweet bread, almost like biscuity, crackery type malt flavors that go with the hops. No yeast profile. So like the previous beer, it's a clean yeast. And we'll go ahead and drink that now. We're also going to talk about sensation. So we're tasting this beer, but we also have what's called mouthfeel. And it can be very different. These are not tastes, but they're sensations. What is a sensation you get when you drink this beer? I would say bitterness. So yeah, it's got a little bit of like a grip to it. It's also very hot flavorful. So you have, along with that malt, a nice, I think, like herbaceous, and as Michael said, citrus. Michael also said tart. Yeah, you can kind of get that from the hops too. They do bring a little bit of like a citrusy that's almost like a little bit of acidicness. Once we stop drinking this and let it settle, I'm going to have a nice dry palate with a good amount of bitterness still remaining in my palate, which makes me want to drink this more. These beers are designed for consumption. They're designed like, I don't know, like some, you think of like German vehicles, like they look at brewing in that same approach. They want to get the maximum amount of effectiveness for a beer. And in this case, it's meant for having liters and liters and liters up and not fatiguing your palate. If you're going to have that prior beer, after a couple liters, I would probably get tired of that robust caramel and that robust toast. I would want something more lighter and leaner to kind of get me through my festival partying. And this beer does that trick.
You're a much better beer drinker than I am. I've had liters and liters. I don't know if I could stand up.
I've had plenty of practice, I think. I'm also good at eating, and that brings me to my next point. This beer pairs so well with Oktoberfest food. So think of like a nice fatty sausage. The bitterness and the hot flavor cut that fat and make it a little bit, easier to get that food down with it too. It's like what's called a good pairing. Cool. Any questions about the fest beer style?
Would this be considered a light beer? In other words, we see that those terms, like Miller Lite instead of Miller. Would this be considered a lighter beer?
It is definitely a lighter beer. I think that's a subjective thing. So if you only drink light lager like Miller, this beer might come off to you as a very bitter, a very robust beer. But if you tend to drink a lot of very flavor forward and larger beers, this might seem to you light, and that's kind of where you sit on the spectrum of beer drinking, you know? So like my father, he drank Rolling Rock every day of his life, you know, that was his beer, and he probably would not even be able to finish this, where me, I would be drinking it all day long.
All right.
Cool, so going off of this, our next beer is going to be the Stone IPA. Think about what I talked about as far as hops going into this Stone Enjoy by IPA. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you, Stephen. And I know that someone asked a question about Nutanix. I saw that on the screen here before. Do you guys want to just go into a little detail about that, or?
I basically pasted an answer there. I mean, in terms of how we at HPE offer Nutanix, it is mainly through HPE GreenLake, and you know, together with Veeam, that would be a feasible solution for data protection. But I don't know, Kevin, do you want to add more from Veeam's perspective on Nutanix?
Yeah, so we can back up Nutanix workloads. We're on a version 2.0 that has been released, and it can be managed. You know, there's a web console that brings up to create the backup jobs, but a lot of the management, such as restores and that sort of stuff, can be done from the actual Veeam backup replication console itself. So it's getting more, you know, our integration with Nutanix is getting a lot tighter.
So that's even with the Acropolis hypervisor, because you know they can run VMware or they can run Acropolis on there. So it doesn't really matter about the hypervisor.
Right. So Veeam supports, yeah, VMware or Acropolis.
Okay. What about other HCI solutions? Because they're becoming more and more popular out there. From obviously SimpliVity from HP is a big one out there, but you know you have almost everyone. I mean, even storage companies like, you know, NetApp has an HCI, and Cisco obviously HyperFlex, VMware with you know, VxRail. I mean, it just seems like that's becoming very, very popular out in the marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, Veeam can, you know, support all of those. So
Okay.
you know, we have good, you know, it's one of those where we have a strong partnership with HPE as well, with the HCI there too. So we can, you know, we're pretty much storage neutral.
Okay, just figured I'd ask. So let's get on. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry to interrupt.
All right, so we got about 5 slides here before the next beer tasting. So talk a little bit about cloud immutability. So back when I started in 2016, you know, the only place you could send via cloud was Cloud Connect, which is to a service provider. But we have what's called the performance tier. The performance tier is your, you know, your Windows repository target, your NAS target, your dedupe appliance like your StoreOnce. You don't have to reinvent the wheel for performance tier. If you know, if your budget consists of, hey, I just have an HPE Proliant and it's an old box, I got some disks in there, that serves with Windows on, that serves as a great performance tier. That's for your first copy. But the performance tier is ideally for your restores, because you want your restores to be fast. If you have a VM that kind of gets corrupt, you want to do an instant VM recovery from a performance tier and make it quick. You can be back up and running in 2 to 3 minutes. However, you know, with the advent of big data, more and more organizations are storing that data for longer term. Some people store data for, you know, forever. So some of the that's where the capacity tier has been introduced, and cloud's been a discussion for a long time now. And Veeam's got a great story to tell. Veeam continues to innovate when it comes to cloud, and that ability to get that data to object store is what we refer to as the capacity tier. So you can click the next button there, Kevin. So within the Amazon S3, we have what's called object lock. And that object lock means is that no one, for a period of time when you set the repository up, is that no one can edit that data. And as you can see in this case, we have it for 30 days. And so no one can touch that data for 30 days. And it also protects against insider attacks. So if you can click the next one, Kevin. So even if you come in, an administrator comes into Veeam backup and replication and tries to delete that file, it's going to fail. And if you go to the next slide here, you can see if you even get access to the AWS root, you're not going to be able to delete it. It's locked down. It's object locked. So there's no way of being able to delete that. Now, the one caveat, and you click the next slide again, Kevin, is that when you set this bucket up for S3, it needs to be set up right away. So enable object lock, and then when you set up your repository to kick that data off to, make sure you define the number of days you want it to be immutable, and that's going to allow you to protect your data even further. Now, that doesn't take away the fact that you should also, what we've discussed before, the other 5 different levels of protection against ransomware. You want all those defenses in place, but this is just an additional layer to protect you and protect your organization from being hit with ransomware. Because one of the things that I had read is like during this COVID-19, where everyone's working from home, and it's more and more prevalent, is the creation of ransomware. So just something to keep in mind is that being able to set up that immutability within AWS, you're going to be able to have that even an additional layer of protection.
So Kevin, you said that you have to set this up from the beginning. So if you've already set up a repository, you can't upgrade it to this. You almost have to create a new one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Just so you guys know, if you're already doing something and you want to enable this, you basically have to set up a new one and start from there on out, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So that brings us to more beer tasting.
And it's back to Steven.
Hey guys, sorry, I'm actually in our bar doing this right now, so the mask I have to keep on when I'm not actively presenting, just for COVID regulations.
Well, I hope you're not drinking in between segments here, Steven. I don't want you laying down by the end.
I have to keep it professional, thankfully. I want to, but
I'm just kidding, by the way.
So the next beer we're going to do is Stone Enjoy by 1031 IPA. So this is an India Pale Ale, and before we pour this beer, we're going to talk about the specifics of the construction of this beer. It is a hop-dominated beer, and we talked about a bit of the brewing process. We're going to go into a little bit more of how hops function in that brewing process. Before beer is fermented, it is boiled. So we run off that sweet, sugary wort I was telling you about that the yeast consume. They boil it, and what that does is, one, it sterilizes the beer, but it also takes those hops and it creates bitterness. And they do that at the beginning of the boil because it needs to isomerize into the wort. And that gives you a nice balance to the sweetness of the sugary wort that the yeast are going to ferment. What we know about hops is they have nice, beautiful flavors and beautiful aromas. They're volatile though, so you just can't throw hops in. Those aromas will get destroyed. So brewers are doing a lot of cool things to maximize hop flavor and hop aroma. So they add that at the end of the boil, and that creates a baseline of flavor and aroma. But they also do crazy things, like after the beer is done boiling and they're whirlpooling it, they throw more hops in. While the beer is fermenting, they throw more hops in. After the beer is fermented and it's resting in a tank, they throw more hops in. That's what's known as dry hopping. If you're really big into IPAs, you might have heard of a technique called double dry hopping. Well, they dry hopped it twice, all to pack in more flavor and more aroma. We knew that these hops are volatile, so Stone is capitalizing on that. And they said, on the can, you have until Halloween to drink this. Enjoy it by 1031. The reason being is hops deteriorate really fast. So if you're a big pale ale or India Pale Ale drinker or American Pale Ale drinker and you love the hops, you always want to get the freshest example of that beer because it'll show off the best vibrancy of the hop aromas and hop flavors. So Stone just said, hey, after the Halloween, don't bother. It's no longer good, which may or may not be the case, but it also gives you a window to know when to drink this beer by and when it's going to be the most vibrant showcasing of hops. They do this beer throughout the year at different dates, usually set around holidays. So we're doing the fall beer tasting. Let's go ahead and check out the Halloween version of Stone Enjoy by IPA. So the first thing I'm going to show you is, holy moly, look at that head. It didn't have as much head in the prior ones. Hops have proteins in them that support head production. So you're going to get a nice, voluminous, beautiful head on that. Let's go ahead and check it out. Look at that malt. Look at that color. It's a beautiful, clear beer. It looks really appetizing. You got a nice big head. It's nice and clear. Golden color. Looks really pretty. That golden color is going to tell me a few things. It's going to be a bit more malt driven than that previous beer. So there might be some caramel malt. There might be some maybe lightly toasted malt, just to support the volume of hops that I assume are going to be in this beer. So let's go ahead and smell it. Shane, that's awesome. Hops are photodegradable. So yeah, keep your beer in the dark, or maybe don't. If you want to try a trick, grab a second glass, put a bit of this beer in there, and set it out in the sun, even for as little as 30 seconds, maybe like 5 minutes. And you're going to hear what a process is called skunking, is what we like to call it in the industry, or light struck. So as they degrade, you get a skunky, I like to call it a marijuana flavor to your hops. It just comes off like a skunk, and it's going to, most people will say, yeah, it ruins your beer. This traditionally we found out in like imported beers, like old lagers used to come to us, and old Belgian beer used to come to us in green bottles or clear bottles. They use that as a marketing technique to show off what is like the beautifulness of the beer. Like, hey, you can see the beer. But it degraded the beer because the beer would sit on the shelves or would have a long voyage across the seas. And so everyone was like, wow, all these imports taste skunky when I have them in the United States, but when I have them in Europe, they taste wonderful. And eventually they caught on and started packaging their beer in bottles and or cans that don't allow for a light spectrum in that degrades hops. I have a question on IPAs hazy. Yes and yes. Filtering and ingredients. So there's a huge trend right now. We're going to talk about this as we drink this beer, about hazy IPAs or New England style IPAs. These beers come off, they look cloudy to downright milky. And this has a lot to do with ingredients. They sometimes will use very protein-based grains like wheat and oats to make the body of the beer heftier, kind of like a Hefeweizen or an American wheat beer. They do this in order to kind of cater to trends. They also, when I was talking about front-loading hops or putting hops in and double dry hops or at other times, they don't filter these hoppings out. They think that when you filter it, it degrades the hop profile. So they're leaving as much hop profile in. I akin this to, as a wine drinker, like natural wine or zero intervention wine, where they want to make that in its purest form. And so for the IPA drinker, they feel that the hazy IPA is the best expression of the hops that are in the beer. So let's stop jabbering and we'll talk real quick about this. Go ahead and give it a smell. Someone tell me what's the first flavor that jumps right out at them. I get pine. That's my first jump.
Yeah,
it's like this tiny, almost like Christmas tree type aroma, but it's followed up as a secondary, and like I said, fruit. That fruit that Mike said, absolutely. It's fruity from the hops. There's no fruit in this, but you'll get like a citrus and berry type profile. These guys like to layer hops so that you get waves of different flavors. Michael Goodpaster said, I don't know, smells sweet to me. You're right. It does smell sweet, and they do that intentionally too with this. You'll notice that this golden color, they use something called caramel malt, which is a roasted malt devoid of oxygen, and it creates like caramel, like caramel corn, etc. That's almost like a sweet caramely type flavor. Andy said, is there an ideal temperature to drink beer, or is it a personal preference? As a whole, the warmer the beer is, the more flavor comes out, but there is that fine line of, it's too warm, right? You want it where it's right for you. At my bar, we serve at two different temperatures. We serve at a very cold temperature of 35 degrees, and we serve some beers at 45 degrees. The beers that we serve warmer are typically malt-focused beers or English-style ales where we want to really express the malt profile of the beer. So let's go ahead and taste this, and I'll answer Kevin's question.
Yeah, I'm not a big beer drinker, so I don't know why they call them IPAs.
Sure. India Pale Ale. There is a very debated myth that during colonial times that the brewers in England would use the antimicrobial properties of hops. So they would take wooden barrels of beer, they would jam a bunch of hops in it, and that would help it stay safe during the voyage to India. We are now finding out that that is kind of a myth, and it's often very debated. But that is the lineage of it, of why they called it IPA. It has been kind of like clouded over, and there's very, very nerdy people that dig into historical brewing records and debate about this stuff all the time. So yeah, back to flavor. Someone said it tasted sweet. Absolutely. This is going to be a sweeter bodied beer, a heavier bodied beer than the previous beers we drank. Something that might clue us into that is the alcohol content of this beer. It's at 9.4%, almost twice the amount of alcohol that the previous two beers. So in order to get the higher alcohol, you have to create more sugar. So you have to add more malt, or a more simple sugar, you can add actual sugar. Either way, what's going to be left behind is the yeast eventually stops partying and gets tired, and it can't ferment it out. So usually the higher alcohol in the beer is going to equal more body, where in some traditions, like the Belgian brewers, they use a lot of very simple sugars along with grain, and the simple sugars are very easy for the yeast to eat. So they get dry beers with high alcohols, and that's just something that they prefer. Where here, this is going to be an all barley beer. You're going to have a bit more of a heft to it, a bit more sweetness, a bit more of a weighty feeling on your palate. Something to check out too is that the sweetness of that beer makes the hop flavors taste kind of candy, right? Like almost like you're sucking on like nice, like herbaceous cough drop. Someone asked if the glass makes a difference. Absolutely. Different glasses do different things. I use our branded snifter, or our branded Tecker type glass, which basically has a shape that keeps aromas in the bowl of the glass. Some people like to drink lagers that have like nice tall glasses, and that could be just the preference for, you know, how it looks. It makes the beer look a little bit different. I wouldn't drink a lager out of a glass like this. In my mind, that doesn't make any sense. I'm going to tell you, drink out of whatever glass you want to drink out of. So finally, in the last part of our tasting, we're going to talk about the finish. I get a lot of bitterness from this beer. This is a very quote unquote traditional IPA. Someone mentioned hazy IPAs earlier. Those hazy IPAs, which you won't taste today, but if you go out and have one, they're very much not into bitterness. They will almost do zero bitterness. They want the most flavor and aroma from the hops, and they don't like bitterness. And that's made IPAs way more approachable for people. Like, this turns a lot of people off. As humans, we're programmed not to like bitterness. Like, that's to us in our mind is saying poison or bad. Where in this case, you know, someone mentioned sweet but bitter. Good. We're balancing out. So you want to balance bitter with sweetness, and that makes the beer approachable.
Why do they drink out of beer steins in Germany?
That's a great question. I think historically, you had your stein, you could set it on the bar, and it protected your beer from who knows what. Gnats, etc. I don't know. I think it's because they look cool. I mean, I love drinking Oktoberfest out of a big, weighty liter mug. To me, that's just so much fun and cool, and it's part of the experience.
All right. Well, thank you, Stephen. We appreciate it. Let's get back to Kevin.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about monitoring and learning with Veeam 1, which is going to help you potentially discover any sort of ransomware activity real time. So I love Veeam 1. It's a great product. There's probably about 150 reports in the Veeam 1 reporter. The Veeam 1 monitor is the alerting. There's color-coded different, ways of looking at it, where you can look into the GUI and say, why is this pie in red? Why is this pie chart in yellow? So good stuff there, and you can drill right into it. And there's also the business view. So if you wanted to group items together, you can do that and report on just monitor just those items. So you can click the next one, Kevin. So the monitoring and alerting, some good stuff there is going to look at your backup environment as well as your virtualized environment. So you're going to be able to see, what's going on from a VMware Hyper-V perspective. We're also going to see your backup infrastructure, if there's any sort of jobs failing, statuses of the proxies and the repositories, things like that. But also the alerting, which is what we're really going to talk about here. You click next. So alarm management, there are over 200 different alarms, and one of the things I recommend is when people buy Veeam 1 and they enable the alarm, and they're going to get a lot of white noise, a lot of stuff they don't want to know about or don't care about. The key with the alarm management is to kind of take some time to go through those alarms, enable and disable the ones that you want. There's 2 specific alarms that are enabled by default, and those are the ones that are going to be related to ransomware, but there's a lot of good alarms within here. There's also knowledge base resolutions for selecting linked to knowledge base articles and how to fix it. So you can click the next one, Kevin. So actually one more. There we go. So this is the first of the 2 different ransomware alerts, possible ransomware activity. And this one's based on if there's any sort of high write rates on the data store with high CPU utilization, this will kick off this alarm. Sometimes it's a false alarm, a false positive, but it's always good to check. It is real time. So this is definitely something that is helpful for our customers, is being able to nip it in the bud right away. You click the next one. The newest one we have is suspicious incremental backup size. So, you do your full backup and then you have incrementals, which is just the change blocks. In a lot of these, backups, there's not a lot of change on them. But what Veeam will do is it'll recognize that, oh, this backup size is a lot bigger than the one before that or the ones before that. It's abnormally large. And it'll fire off that alarm as well. So if it's seeing, some of that encryption happening on those files and seeing, Veeam will discover whether it's suspicious. So it'll actually it'll fire off this alarm and say, hey, you might want to take a look at this. So those are the 2 alarms that's going to help you with some of the real-time monitoring of your Veeam environment, of your environment. And again, this is very last layer stuff where you have all those other pillars in front of this, but the back, this is the goaltender on the soccer field, trying to keep the hackers away from putting the ball in the net. So
it doesn't do any remediation. It just basically does alerting, correct, Kevin?
Right. This is telling you, hey, you're going to want to look at this ASAP. So
right.
Yep. So you can hit next.
Oh man.
Oh, that's fast. We're back to Steven already.
Yeah, you're talking too quick here, Kevin. I'm starting to get drunk on Steven's beer.
I want to keep all your buzzes going.
All right, guys. We're going to talk about our final beer, and this is Typeworks prize-winning pie. So do you remember way back an hour ago when I was talking about ingredients, we talked about the secret 5th ingredient beer, and that is adjuncts. Adjuncts are, to be very specific, they're anything that's not barley. But in this, we like to use a bit more looser. Just so you're clear, this beer does have lactose in it, which is milk sugar. So if you have a milk allergy, proceed with caution. But this is an ale, and it has apple juice, lactose, vanilla, cinnamon, and nutmeg. So we could pretty much bake a pie with this beer right here. Let's go ahead and give it a try. We're going to pour it dead center down the middle. Give it a look. I was also following the whiskey conversation.
Yeah, biggest head yet, though.
Yeah. It also is what? Can I see through this beer? It's super hazy. I don't know what the cause of that is. I might think it's just because of all the stuff they put in this beer. That's an educated guess. I don't know. But yes, huge head. And that could be a variety of things. It could be something that's supporting protein. Maybe there's a wheat base in this. It could be that this is a highly carbonated beer. They might have made a stylistic choice to make it more carbonated than the other beers. It's just kind of really a brewer's choice in that matter. So now we've seen this beer. Let's go ahead and smell it. I'm just saying I'm expecting a lot. Anyone go ahead and shout out or type rather what they're getting out of this beer. What's the primary aroma? I'm getting pumpkin spice, nutmeg, holiday spices. Yep, Patrick called it. Let's go ahead and see. Yeah, the IPA might have wrecked your palate. I kind of had to toss it up. I kind of feel like the spices of this might be even more intense than the IPA. So let's go ahead and try it.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So this is pretty wild. Like, I kind of feel like I was expecting it to be way more harsh it was, but we talked about like mouthfeel. I think they nailed the feeling of eating a piece of pumpkin pie. Like there's a bit of fluffiness to it, right? It felt like a nice fluffy, like sweet pumpkin pie. What's everybody tasting? I'm getting that vanilla. I'm definitely getting that apple juice that's making it kind of tart. Kind of ties in the pie. Don't really taste the lactose, but sometimes brewers add lactose to create body. And that might be what I'm tasting with this like fluffiness in this beer, that fluffy sensation when it's in my mouth. You see me swirling the glass. I'm trying to activate aromas. Aromas are a big part of how we taste. Go ahead and use your nose and drink this. It won't taste the same because you smell and then you taste. No, I dive right in. I want to get that head on my mustache for sure.
It's very apple.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of that juice. And that's funny you mentioned the apple. Yeah, it is very good. It does kind of have an akin to a ciderness, and that's how it finishes to me. It finishes like a nice cider. I think this is kind of a good fall beer. Usually when I try these beers that are like heavily adjuncted, they're what we say are heavy-handed. Like they pound you with vanilla, or they pound you with the spice to the point that it's undrinkable. Where I think there is a bit of a balance of this. I think they did a really good job making this as advertised. Like, okay, this is a prize-winning pie. It tastes like prize-winning pie to me. It's definitely a pie beer. Am I looking to drink pie beer? I don't think so. That's not my go-to, but it's a fun experience. I call this a shareable beer. So this is a fun beer at parties when we can have parties. Like, hey, everybody, let's try the pumpkin pie beer. You know, it's not something I'm going to sit and watch the game and drink pie beer. You know, it's not that style of beer. This is definitely an experiential, shareable experience beer.
I think it has the least aftertaste too.
You're right. I mean, that juice is there, but that's really all you get. You don't get a bitterness. It doesn't sit on your palate. And I think that's kind of like that fluffiness kind of like fades away, like a cloud. These beers differ between Sad Adams and Corona for a lot of reasons. Let's first talk about Corona. Someone mentioned hop degradation earlier. Coronas use a hop that don't degrade from light struck. They don't get skunky. It's a special hop that is engineered not to do that, and that's why you see their beer in those beautiful clear bottles. How it brews differs from Sad Adams. I mean, I don't think it does. Sam Adams makes a variety of beers. They make all these styles of beers, but they do it on a macro level. The Brewers Association, it's the guild that controls craft beer for the most part, or independent breweries, keeps raising the barrel amounts that you can create to include Sam Adams. So Sam Adams is still technically, I mean, last I checked, this could have changed, a craft brewer, an independent brewer, but they brew on the scale of most major breweries, and their beer reflects that. You know, it is definitely not going to be small artisanal products. It's a mass marketed product. You can find it across the country. You can find it at grocery chains, etc. Most of the beers we tried today are by smaller breweries. Like wood beers that we tried, I could leave here, throw my mask on, and walk to those breweries pretty easily here in Chicago. Victory, they're in Pennsylvania. they are a very established American craft beer, one of the founders of American craft beer. So you can find them usually any place as well. They make a very well recognized tripel, a Belgian style tripel, is called Golden Monkey, that many people say is one of the best American examples of Belgian brewing. Any other questions?
For those of you that are out there, if you want to just mention what you thought was your favorite beer out of the four, I mean, it'd be nice just to see what people liked compared to other people. I mean, I kind of like the second one. I like that Maplewood, probably the best out of all of them. And there's a Stone, which I think, yeah, I mean, that's a little too powerful for me.
I'm with Patrick. Maker's Mark is great.
All right, well, let's get back into this, and thank you very much, Stephen. We appreciate your time here.
Guys,
and I know this should wrap up Kevin's last slides before we get into the HP side of it.
All right, so quite an education we got there in beer. Amazing how knowledgeable he is about it. Some really good stuff. They're great listening to him. So thank you, Stephen. So a little bit about the data labs, and you can pop those in now, Kevin.
Okay.
So what's good about the data labs, with the Veeam data lab, it's also known as a virtual lab. It comes as part of a Veeam license. And what it will do is you create what's called a little fenced off network area. So it's called a data lab, and it's segmented away from production. And you can do all sorts of cool stuff in there. You can use it as an on-demand sandbox to test application upgrades and patches. Sure Backup and Sure Replica allows you to test your backups and your replicas. Stage Restore, if you have any GDPR that you need to remove, you can use that with a Stage Restore. And the Secure Restore is the one that I mentioned that has the data integration API, where it will leverage particular antivirus softwares to be able to scan your backup file to make sure there's no viruses on it before it will put it into production. And if it does discover a virus, it will abort. So click next. See, as I said, it will bring the backup, it'll mount the backup file in the disks, and then it'll trigger the antivirus to scan. It's optional, you don't have to do this, but again, it's another layer to prevent reinfecting your environment. So it'll trigger the antivirus to scan. For example, Windows Defender, ESET, et cetera, will be the types of antivirus vendors that we work with Trend, and be able to do that. So you click next. So that's pretty much what the Secure Restore does. Actually, correction, I got to double check we support Trend, so I got to double check that. But I know it's ESET and Windows Defender, and there's one of those eluding me off the top of my head. But anyway, so Veeam stands out among the rest when it comes to ransomware protection. We can do the real-time monitoring, the automated, you can do your backup testing, secure restores, the snapshotting, the HPE snapshots, that nice integration there with HPE, with these snapshots, which are read-only, Catalyst support, which you won't be able to discover, as well as the S3 cloud immutability, where no one can crack open a particular file for a particular designated time frame. So it's a comprehensive type of ransomware protection, and it also will help you, your last layer of defense before any sort of ransomware really infects your environment. So thank you very much from the Veeam perspective.
Yeah, I know, Kevin, that the hardest thing with ransomware is where to restore from, right? I mean, how far back is the ransomware embedded in your environment? Right. And I think that's where Veeam really stands out from the competition, is letting them know this is 100% good backup, correct?
That's correct. And the other part about that is, you can go back, depending on how many retention points or days you keep your backups for, you can go back in time and, restore from, say, several days ago if you need to, just to alleviate the ransomware. So that is possible as well. Okay.
Well, thanks a lot. We really appreciate it. And I know, I can't believe we're doing another beer tasting thing. It seems like we're doing more of Stephen than we are of Veeam and HP. What are we going to talk about now, Stephen, since we've tasted all the different beers? guess he's not going to help us. So let's jump right into HP and find out how they integrate with Veeam. So take it away.
Okay, great. So as many folks know, HP and Veeam have been partners for many, many years. And I'd like to spend a little bit time going over all of our integration points and how we make the availability and data protection for our customers a better experience. So here on this slide, you see a variety of products that we have that integrate very nicely with Veeam. So starting on the left-hand side, we have the primary storage from HPE, particularly HPE Primera, HPE 3PAR on the higher end, and then HPE Nimble storage on the mid-range. And you see that in this section, we integrate with the storage snapshots and Veeam for at least the least data loss and the fastest daily restores. And then moving on to the next pillar, we have our backup targets, and we offer some choice to our customers regarding what kind of backup target they'd like based on their use case. So we have HPE StoreOnce as our backup appliance. We have the HPE Nimble storage that could put your backups to work, so you can make copies of your backup and then use it for other like test dev or analytics and whatnot. And then finally, the Apollo 4000 platform that provides an all-in-one backup where you can run the Veeam software and also your backup repositories on Apollo. Moving on to the next pillar, we have offsite or hosted backup archival for compliance, audit, and disaster recovery. And here again, HPE StoreOnce plays a role. HPE StoreEver is our tape library. The new offering that we have that integrates with Veeam is the HPE Cloud Volumes Backup that enables you to back up directly to the cloud and restore back again. And then we have our HPE servers, and that includes our Apollo 4000 platforms that also integrate with Veeam via the VM replicas. And then finally, we have our HPE SimpliVity, which is our traditional HCI platform that integrates with Veeam. But needless to say, we also have Nimble DHCI or disaggregated HCI that also integrates with Veeam.
Right.
All right. Okay, next slide. So here are more details about our integration points. So with Veeam 10, back in February, we actually announced an extensive set of features or integrations, I should say. The first one was integrating with the HPE Primera Snapshot. So we already had Snapshot integration with HPE 3PAR and HPE Nimble, and we extended that offering to HPE Primera. So for those of you who may not know, HPE Primera is our new storage platform for mission-critical applications. It has 100% availability guarantee, and it also includes HPE InfoSight for proactive monitoring and maintenance. So with this integration with Veeam, we offer snapshot orchestration, backing up from storage snapshot, as well as pure persistent support. Moving on to our next integration point with Veeam 10 is extending our HPE StoreOnce Catalyst support. So we had talked about Catalyst as the secret sauce for StoreOnce, basically as the protocol that enables faster performance and also counters ransomware attacks. But here we're extending this support, and this allows us to have more efficient disaster recovery, and that is what we call the Catalyst copy feature. So it supports virtual environments and backup copy jobs, but in terms of the Catalyst support, we have, support of Windows agents, Linux agents, future agents, as well as plugins with Oracle RMAN and SAP HANA. So that is just the Catalyst part of it. But then going on to the next pillar
Marisa, can I ask one question on that? Yes. Because I know a lot of our customers have Unix-based systems for Solaris and AIX. Do you have any time frame on that? Because that's a really important feature. I didn't know you guys were doing that.
Yeah, so these are it could be. I mean, I don't know exactly the time frame, but those are some that we're definitely thinking of in terms of our installed base for sure.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
It makes it one solution that can back up everything. So that's really
exactly,
right.
and that's really the point here. Exactly. So now extending that StoreOnce Catalyst is the Catalyst copy that I mentioned earlier. And so that is a built-in StoreOnce functionality, which enables you to move backup copies offsite very efficiently for disaster recovery. And also you can have backup data copies from one StoreOnce to another StoreOnce without having to rehydrate data in flight. So that is a very strong capability that we're offering with Veeam 10. And then finally, the HPE Cloud Volumes backup integration that I had mentioned before. So HPE Cloud Volumes backup is in conjunction with HPE Cloud Volumes. It is our enterprise cloud backup service, and it delivers a very easy, efficient, and flexible way to store your backup data in the cloud of your choice from HPE or even non-HPE primary storage arrays. So that's really important here. So you basically, because of the ease and the simplicity of it, you can move to the cloud without changing backup policies. You can keep Veeam as your backup software and its familiar user interface. There is direct integration, so you don't really need any plugins. And also you can use the same backup sets or catalogs or policies. All right, so the next slide, please. So for each of the pillars that I talked about, I'm going to drill down just a little bit so you know what is involved here. So the first one I talked about was the HPE Primera Storage Snapshot integration. And here are some of the benefits that customers can get from this integration. So first of all, you have the Veeam backed up from Storage Snapshot. And the beauty of that is that you minimize the backup impact on your production services. And it's also very easy. You just have to select or click that enable backup from storage snapshots, and it's basically there. The second benefit is that snapshot only Veeam job. So you can improve your RPOs with application consistent intraday restore points. You can also minimize your data loss with direct VM recovery from those snapshots. And the final benefit here is the hardware snapshot as independent restore point. So you can basically restore your application from any snapshot. And by doing that, you can also shorten your recovery time objectives to less than 5 minutes. And so that means that you can recover very, very quickly from even minutes old snapshots. In the next slide, we talk about our expanded integration via HPE StoreOnce Catalyst with Veeam. And here are some benefits that I talked a little bit about. So it's basically increased data security because we're using the Catalyst store. You can have multiple sources that are processed by the Veeam gateway using Catalyst. And then we support additional workloads. So Nutanix hypervisor, in addition to VMware and Hyper-V. We support physical Windows and Linux servers, as well as Oracle RMAN and SAP HANA backups. So moving on to the third one. Now here is where, because we talked about Catalyst, I'd like to, and because we're talking about ransomware, and I know Kevin also mentioned ransomware here, is that Catalyst really is our solution to countering these ransomware attacks. So here is where you have your hypervisor with the VMs, you have the Veeam proxy and the gateway. If you click on this, Kevin, one more time. Yeah, so these are some ways that you can actually do the different paths that you can go through. So this is the local disk path. So if you click one more time, this is your NAS share path, and then finally this is your Catalyst API path. So via StoreOnce. You also, in the next click, you see that there are tape libraries where you can directly write to those tape libraries. And then finally, in the other click, you have the storage snapshots here. Now, let's say that there is a ransomware attack. So let's click one more time. here's where the ransomware is attacking. And let's see that for each one of these paths, how it works. So you have, it basically goes through your Windows server. That is your, and if you have the local disk, it will actually infect your restore points. Same with NAS share. But look what happens when it goes through the Catalyst API. It gets stopped there. So the access is denied to the malware or the virus, and the repository is visible only using Catalyst API. So that's how we counter any ransomware attack. Okay, now let's move on to the next integration point. We talked about the Catalyst copy, which is pretty new. By supporting Catalyst copy in Veeam, what we do for our customers is to improve the performance for copying backup data between two HPE StoreOnce systems. You can eliminate the data rehydration, and by that, you can improve backup recovery performance. And then another key point here is that you reduce the amount of data that gets transferred. And so, you're basically freeing up bandwidth for other applications that you're running. And then finally, you decrease costs to offsite copies. All right, and then here is our Cloud Volumes backup integration. So as I mentioned, the key here is simplicity and efficiency. So you see that you can use the workflows from a single console after an HPE Cloud Volumes backup is created, just with a few clicks. There's built-in security with encryption in transit and at rest. Obviously reduce bandwidth costs, which becomes very important when you have cloud in the picture, so free egress costs, and then the recovery back to any on-premises location and storage technology.
Parisa, we've got a question here from Mike about Open VMS. Is there any plans on supporting Open VMS as a backup?
Unfortunately not. No, not at this time.
Okay, just figured I'd ask. I mean, I was trying to answer the questions.
Thank you. All right, so just to wrap things up, so as you all know, Veeam 10 launched on February 18th with more than 150 new features. And so there were 3 key integrations that we announced. So Primera Snapshot integration, the expanded StoreOnce Catalyst support, as well as support of StoreOnce Catalyst copy. And so in general, we are offering even stronger data protection solutions by providing better backup recovery speeds, increasing data security, and of course, being very sensitive to customer costs or total cost of ownership. And so again, we have a very long-standing partnership dating back over 10 years. So we look forward to even working closer with Veeam. And in the next slide,
it does look like if ransomware is something that you're concerned about. And by the way, I mean, I just saw news stories about it just last week about ransomware still running wild.
Yes.
Seems like the Veeam HP story is a really good one to start talking about inside corporations.
Yeah, and not only that, in this COVID-19 era, we see that there are actually a lot of attacks on hospitals or even research, or just the fact that disinformation is around all over the place. I think I've seen many articles around ransomware attacks in those areas.
Yeah, I know the hospitals are getting hit pretty hard because they, obviously they have to keep their data longer than most people do, so they're a little bit more susceptible, I think.
That's right. That's right.
All right. Well, next steps. One thing that we want to tell you about here is obviously we got a lot of great information here, both about beer, but more importantly about how to back up and recover and also protect yourself from viruses and ransomware. And if you contact your champion client manager, set up an appointment, we're going to be sending out, if you guys are fishermen and, this is, I know it's the winter time coming, but ice fishing is still popular. We're going to send out this really nice big bopper floatable cooler to put in your pool. I know that, us here in Florida, right, Kevin, I don't think there's a season where we're not in the pool. And then even in California, I think a little south of you guys, though, right, Parissa? I think
Yep.
you get a little chilly up there. At least the last time I was up in your neck of the woods, it wasn't cold. I mean, it was cold.
Yep.
But this is a great way to get a complimentary cooler just for setting up a meeting to really go over your environment, see how Veeam and HP can help you with your backup needs, can help you really across the board, whether it's on premise or in the cloud. I think you see that we have a lot of things to offer here from an HP and Veeam standpoint. I want to just ask Stephen if he wants to, because I know we skipped by him a little quickly there. So I'm going to bring it back. We do have like 5 minutes left. Stephen, you want to add anything to your discussion about beer? Hello? Yes? No? Maybe? Okay. Any questions from the gallery here? I think you guys did a great job. I really appreciate Kevin and Parissa, you taking your time to educate our audience. Also, really good information about what solutions are available out there. If anyone has any questions, now's a great time to ask. I mean, we got the experts on the line here with Kevin and Parissa. Anything you guys want to ask about? Nope. Good information. Thank you very much, Chris. Thanks. We really appreciate it. All right, guys. Stephen, you want to add? Are you there? I don't know. It looks like your camera is stuck or something. I guess so. Well, with that, I appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Have a really great week and weekend. Kevin, Parissa, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Really appreciate you coming for this. Great job, Stephen.
Thanks a lot.
Participating.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.